Do all human beings crave power?
No. Human beings crave security, they crave love, they crave adventure, they crave power, but not equally,
Some human beings, nevertheless, do crave power.
for sure.
Where is that deeply in the psychology of people? Is it something you're born with? Is it something you develop?
Some people crave a position of leadership or of standing out, of being recognized. And that could be starting out in the school years, on the schoolyard. It could be within their own family, not just in their peer group. Those kind of people we often see craving leadership positions from a young age, often end up in positions of power. But they can be varied positions of power. You can have power in an institution where your power is purposefully limited. For example, there's a board or a consultative body or a separation of powers. Not everyone craves power whereby they're the sole power or they're their unconstrained power. That's a little bit less usual. We may think that everybody does, but not everybody does. Those people who do crave that kind of power, unconstrained, the ability to decide as much as life or death of other people, those people are not everyday people. They're not the people you encounter in your daily life for the most part. Those are extraordinary people. Most of them don't have the opportunity to live that dream. Very few of them, in fact, end up with the opportunity to live that dream.
So, percentage wise, in your sense, if we think of George Washington, for example, most people, given the choice of absolute power over a country versus maybe the capped power that the United States presidential role, at least at the founding of the country, represented, what do you think most people would choose?
Well, Washington was in a position to exercise far greater power than he did. And in fact, he didn't take that option. He was more interested in seeing institutionalization, of seeing the country develop strong institutions rather than an individual leader like himself have excess power. So that's very important. So, like I said, not everyone craves unconstrained power, even if they're very ambitious. And of course, Washington was very ambitious. He was a successful general before he was a president. So, that clearly comes from the influences on your life, where you grow up, how you're raised, what kind of values are imparted to you along the way. You can understand power as the ability to share, or you can understand or the ability to advance something for the collective in a collective process, not an individual process. So power comes in many different varieties, and ambition doesn't always equate to despotic power. Despotic power is something different from ordinary institutional power that we see, right? The president of MIT does not have unconstrained power. The president of MIT rightly must consult with other members of the administration, with the faculty members, to a certain extent with the student body, and certainly with the trustees of MIT. Those constraints make the institution strong and enduring and make the decisions better than they would be if he had unconstrained power. But you can't say that the president is not ambitious. Of course, the president is ambitious. We worry about unconstrained power. We worry about executive authority that's not limited. That's the definition of authoritarianism or tyranny: unlimited or barely limited executive authority. Executive authority is necessary to carry out many functions. We all understand that. That's why MIT has an executive, has a president. But unlimited or largely unconstrained executive power is detrimental to even the person who exercises that power.
So, what do you think? It's an interesting notion. We kind of take it for granted that constraints on executive power is a good thing. but why is that necessarily true? So, what is it about absolute power that does something bad to the human mind? So, the popular saying of absolute power corrupts, absolutely. Is that the case, that the power in itself is the thing that corrupts the mind in some kind of way where it leads to a bad leadership over time?
People make more mistakes when they're not challenged, when they don't have to explain things and get others to vote and go along with it, when they can make a decision without anybody being able to block their decision or to have input necessarily on their decision. You're more prone to mistakes. You're more prone to extremism. There's a temptation there. For example, we have separation of powers in the United States. The Congress, right, has authority that the president doesn't have, as, for example, in budgeting, the so called power of the purse. This can be very frustrating. People want to see things happen, and they complain that there's a do nothing Congress or that the situation is stalemated. But actually, that's potentially a good thing. In fact, that's how our system was designed. Our system was designed to prevent things happening in government. And there's frustration with that, but ultimately, that's the strength of the institutions we have. And so when you see unconstrained executive authority, there can be a lot of dynamism. A lot of things can get done quickly. But those things can be like, for example, what happened in China under Mao, or what happened in the Soviet Union under Stalin, or what happened in Haiti under Papa Doc and then Baby Doc, or fill in the blank, right? What happens sometimes in corporations where a corporate leader is not constrained by the shareholders, by the board, or by anything. And they can seem to be a genius for a while, but eventually it catches up to them. And so the idea of constraints on executive power is absolutely fundamental to the American system, American way of thinking, and not only America. Obviously, large other parts of the world that have a similar system, not an identical system, but a similar system of checks and balances on executive power. And so the case that I study, the only checks and balances on executive power are circumstantial. So, for example, distances in the country. It's hard to do something over 5,000 miles, or the amount of time in a day. It's hard for a leader to get to every single thing the leader wants to get to because there are only 24 hours in a day. Those are circumstantial constraints on executive power. They're not institutional constraints on executive power.